Hi, friend. Scott Brookins. Do you have an imagination? I hope you do, you know. But sometimes, especially as adults, we don't use it, do we? We have one as kids. Imagine back, think back, see, imagine back, think back to when you were a kid and you imagined all the time. When I was maybe 7, 8, 9 years old, my parents bought a new kitchen appliance. It was probably a stove maybe a refrigerator. I don't remember what it was, but I remember that it had a big box. And that was not just a box, that was an Apollo space capsule. And so I took that out in the backyard. My mom and dad bought me a bunch of uh, silver spray can paint cans, and I spent a couple hours painting this box silver. And then I had some paint and I painted USA on the sides. And I don't know if I did a flag or not, but and then we cut a door and a window, and I was an Apollo astronaut. And I must have imagined that for probably a couple months at least. It wasn't a box, it was an Apollo spacecraft, and I was there on the way to the moon. And so, what happens as we get older? We lose our imagination, or we put it aside. And a lot of times as we grow older, people tell us, put away your imagination. That ever happened to you? Boy, it happened to me. You know, um, Going through school and saying, I want to be a professional football player or a musician, or create whatever it was. And we have teachers or people that care about us and say, maybe you should think of another path, or do something more dependable, or get a good job. And so we put the imagination, the goals and dreams in the back of our head. I went to college and I wanted to be a jazz musician, and was told, probably, classical music is probably more reliable, and or maybe get a teaching degree, and that gives you something to fall back on. And teachers are awesome, and I'm not saying that, but for me, that wasn't for me. I ended up leaving that school. I actually got an accounting degree and did music on the side until it became my profession. And then, years later, God called me to the ministry to use that music. And even in the ministry, I had people tell me, God didn't really call you to be a trumpet soloist or an evangelist for Him. Really? I felt God tell me to do that. And so, what happens if we let people or even ourselves, tell us not to do things or not to dream or not to use our imagination, then we stop. Doubt, it puts a stop to our imagination. I love this quote by Rick Warren, Pastor Rick Warren from Saddleback out in California. He said, we get stuck, we lose our imagination when we get stuck in status quo. And he said that's Latin for the mess that we're in. And so, that sometimes happens, right? Doubt and fear can stop us from following what God wants us to do, or for God working in our lives. And, it takes courage to imagine. I tried to always encourage our children as they were growing up, and even today, I try to do my best to encourage them to go after their dreams and use the gifts and talents that God has given them and go after them. A few years ago, our kids were graduating from college, and they're both in the arts and the film or theater business. And we were at a church somewhere in the Midwest, I guess. I can't remember. I think so. And we were spending time with the pastor and his wife. And this was like a Saturday night, and I was going to do the service and preach the next day. And we're having dessert. And, the pastor's wife, she said, well, didn't you discourage your kids from going into the arts? And Laura and I just kind of like, no, yeah, this is their gifting and calling. And so her point was, this lady's point was, there's not a steady job in the arts. Well, I've been a missionary for 22 years. It's not a steady job as being a missionary either, right? We live on faith. We trust God to provide our housing and our food and certainly our finances. Well, that's not a steady job. And so in our lives, using our imagination and going in kind of against the grain, so to speak, has been how we've lived. And like I said, it takes courage to go after our imagination or to imagine. And the reason we stop is that we're afraid of failure. right? We think, oh gosh, if I imagine I want to do this business or this project or do this certain type of career, what happens if I fail? Well, what happens if you don't? You know, I remember when I was starting college and dreaming of being, a musician. And well, I can still remember one of my thoughts was, I didn't want to be 62 years old. And I have no idea why that number stuck in my head, but I didn't want to be 62 years old and wonder what if. I didn't want to look back and choose a different career path and kind of squelch my dreams or my imagination and wonder, what would have happened if I would have gone after those dreams and imagination? And so I try to live every day of imagining, using God's gifts and talents he's given me to imagine what he wants me to do and going for it. Now, I may be scared to death and you may be scared to death too. Our legs may be shaken, but we need to go after it. We need to say, our fear, our doubts are not going to dominate our lives. Have you ever been on a ropes course or zip lining? They're pretty fun, and some of them are pretty extreme from what I've seen. But several years ago, when our kids were in high school, we went to Amelia and Ethan went with me. We went to a ropes course, and it was a day-long thing. They had a lot of different obstacles, and we did it as a father and son and daughter, and it was a great time. But the last kind of ropes course was maybe 30, 40 feet up in the trees. And you're hooked in, you can't fall. If you fall down, you're going to fall about 3 feet and the rope is going to catch you and you're not going to hit the ground 40 feet below. At least that's what they tell you. But no, it is very safe. So we're climbing through these trees and my kids are in front of me. And we get to a part where there's two ropes or wires that go between two trees. And it's maybe 20 feet. It's not that far. But that's all you have to stand on. You kind of have a rope as a rail, and then you're just supposed to walk across. And so our son just kind of, just like there was nothing there, like it was a big bridge or something. And our daughter did really well too, a little more hesitant, but just went right across. And I get up there, I'm thinking, boy, that looked easy. And I step off the platform onto these two ropes, and there's one on each foot, and all of a sudden my feet are doing this. My legs are shaking like crazy. I can't stop shaking, and I'm holding on with my arms, and I'm just like petrified for some reason, right? I'm safe. I'm not going to fall more than 2 feet. I only got 20 feet to go across, but I can't get my balance. I can't relax. And I finally just, my kids are saying, come on, Dad, you can do it. It's no big deal. Just go. And I finally just, okay, somehow I got to keep my feet on these ropes and go across. I was scared, shaken, and I made it across. And then, you do a couple other platforms, and then you do the zip line, boom, which is the funnest part of it. And then you get to the ground and you say, I did it. I did it. And so I want to just encourage us to be led by our imagination. Our imagination can either be led by fear or by faith. And if we let it be led by fear, then we're scared all the time. We're worried. We're stressed out. We're freaked out. Maybe we're afraid to do anything. Maybe afraid to go outside or afraid to drive a car or whatever our minds, create negatively. That's walking by fear. But if we let our imagination run by faith and let God guide us, then we can trust in him. And then we can decide that I'm not going to let fear dominate my life. I'm going to use the imagination that God has given me to go after whatever that might be. It could be getting a new job. It could be moving across the country, moving to another country. It could be going down and serving in a soup kitchen and helping people out. Whatever that is, do it. And so you may ask, well, what if I fail? Well, what if you don't? Now, am I saying you're going to succeed at everything you try? Probably not. I don't think that probably ever happens. But what are you going to learn from it so that you improve and go on to the next thing? But what if you do succeed? What if? And so I just want to encourage you today to use your imagination. Don't let fear dominate in your life. Have the faith in God that he's put gifts and talents in you for a purpose. That purpose is to glorify him and to impact other people's lives. So step out today. Be run by the faith in your imagination. Have that imagination and joy like you did when you were a kid, like you built a spaceship or you were a princess or the king or the soldier, or whatever it was. use that imagination and say, what if this comes true? So have an amazing day. Please like and share this, and go inspire others to have an amazing day themselves. God bless.